couple things you want to keep in mind when casting is, excuse me, try to stay as relaxed as possible. Relax your shoulders, okay? The more relaxed that you are in your shoulder, upper body area, the easier it's going to be to cast. When you tense up, your muscles are going to tense up, and the repetitive motion of doing what you're doing is going to make your shoulder sore. So the more relaxed you are, the better off you are, okay? Another thing is, the misconception is you use a lot of wrist when you cast. You don't want to use a ton of wrist. You can use a little bit, but you don't want to snap your wrist like you're snapping a whip or something. And the reason that you don't want to do that is because if you do that, the rod will vibrate violently, and your line will also vibrate violently because of the fishing stick doing that, and your cast won't go out as straight or as far, and it's going to make you cast harder and harder to try to get distance when you're being counterproductive. Okay, so on your forward cast, you can use a little bit of wrist, but you don't want to snap the rod per se. Okay, so a little wrist is okay, a whole lot of wrist is bad. All right, so so you do your basic cast. What you want to do is go ahead and take off however much line you need off the reel initially. It's an arbitrary amount, 4 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet, whatever. Go ahead and pull it off the reel first. The next thing you want to try to do is, off the tip of the fly rod, you want to have at least, say, 4 feet of line to as much as 9 feet or maybe even 10 feet of yellow line off the tip of the rod. The reason you want to do that is so that you have forward weight off the fishing stick. These rods are built and designed to be fast action, and with fast action rods, they're stiff on the tip. So if you have no forward weight off the tip will not bend as easy. Okay, so having 9 to 10 feet of yellow line off the tip of the rod is going to give you forward weight to help bend the rod tip for your cast. Okay, to do a basic cast, what we're going to do is we're going to start at this position, rod tip low to the water, and with a semi-firm wrist, you're going to have a relaxed shoulder, and you're going to bend from your elbow forward. So my shoulder's relaxed, I'm starting low to the water, semi-firm wrist. I'm going to go from this position to this position, stop, wait for the rod to load up, and then your thumb on top of the grip, I'm going to drive the rod forward to about this position. So your arm movement is basically 12 inches. It's from here to here and just back down to here. Any real other exaggerated motion of, I don't know, this or this, you're going to have your fly line kind of going all over the place, and you're going to lose the load in your rod, so your line is not going to get slung away from you. Okay? All right, so once again, I've got about 9 to 10 feet of yellow line off the tip of the rod. I'm going to grip the line, and you need to grip the line so it doesn't slip through your grip, so that the rod tip will load. If I have a hold of the line in my line hand, when I come off the water, the line is held to the water with surface tension. So as I pull off the water, the tip is going to bend like this. And that's because I have a hold of the line here. As I break off the water, come back to my back cast and stop, again holding on to the line throughout the casting stroke, the line will reach its whatever length it is off the tip and bend the rod tip again this way. Okay, that's loading the rod. Once I feel the rod load up, again maintaining my grip on the line, I'm going to drive the rod forward, and with that tension on the line, the rod stays bent. Once you stop under forward cast, the rod tip unloads and slings your line away from you. Okay? All right, so here we go. I'm gonna grip the line, I'm gonna grip the rod. You start with the low rod tip, come off the water nice and sharp, stop, come forward and stop. Okay, once again, grip the line, grip the rod, come off the water nice and sharp, stop, come forward and stop. A couple things that you should notice is this loop of line has never changed in size. It has not gotten smaller because I have a hold line throughout the casting stroke. And two, every time that I start my cast, I start with a low rod tip. And if you watch the rod tip, when I come off the water, it's nice and bent. Okay? Opposed to this, if I start with a high rod tip, there's less load in the rod because there's less line on the water. There's going to be less bend in the rod tip. Okay? Once again. And the line is slower. The line speed is slower. As I increase my line length, if I continue to do that, you've created a pendulum with hooks on it coming at you. So if I start with a high rod tip and try to lift all this off the water, I've got all that gear coming at me and I have no line speed and I have no cast. Okay? So when you cast, again, make sure you start with a low rod tip, grip the line, grip the rod, come off the water nice and sharp, stop, come forward and stop. How do you extend the length of your cast? You're going to do the exact same cast, except this time, when I physically see my rod tip out here in front of me, I'm going to stop my casting stroke and drop the line out of my line hand. Okay, this works, or this does work, as long as you keep a hold of the line all the way through the casting stroke. Okay, if you create slack in the line as you're going through your casting stroke, you're probably going to lose load in the rod and the rod tip won't sling your line away from you. Okay, so to extend the length of your cast, we're going to do the exact same cast as we had before, starting with a low rod tip, semi-firm wrist. I'm going to start from this position, go to this position, nice, quick, sharp movement, stop, wait to feel that rod tip load, which means you're going to feel the rod tip kind of tug on you a little bit. As soon as you feel that, that's your tell to drive the rod forward. I'm going to drive the rod forward, and as soon as I see the rod tip at about my eye level, I'm going to go ahead and just drop the line out of my hand, and as long as I've kept a hold of the line all the way through my casting stroke at that point, the line should just pull away from me. Okay, so here we go. Grip the line, grip the rod, come off the water nice and sharp, stop, come forward, and stop. And every time that I do that, you're going to work out whatever length of line you have sitting here in front of you. If you notice, I'm not torquing on the rod. I mean, I am not really punching on the rod. The more that I try to do that, the less likely my line is going to go away from me. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to come off the water correctly, but when I come forward, I'm going to really punch on the rod, and you'll see that the rod vibrate, and you'll see the line vibrate as well. Okay? And that's just punching on the rod. Okay? Also, to extend the length of your cast, if I don't physically drop the line out of my hand and let the rod tip pull or sling the line away from me, and try to let the line slide across my hand, this is going to slow your line speed down. Okay, and as the line speed slows down, it's not going to go as far, and it's going to force you to cast harder and harder and harder. and that's because of friction on the line across your hand. Okay, so I'm going to, instead of dropping the line out of my hand to extend the length of my cast, I'm going to try to let it slide across my hand, and you're going to see how slow it goes and how less far it goes. I'm going to start casting harder and harder and harder, and it's not going anywhere, opposed to me doing that. Every time I do that and just drop the line out of my hand, it's going to pull the line away. I mean, it's just basic physics. It just does that, okay? So once again, to extend the length of your cast, you're going to do the exact same basic forward cast, or cast in general, except when I physically see my rod tip here, I'm just going to drop the line out of my hand. And if you do that every time, you'll start getting a little bit more distance out of your cast. Okay. You're going to set your cast down wherever you need to set it down at. As soon as your flies hit the water, go ahead and lower your rod tip to the surface of the water. With your line hand, grab the line behind this first stripping guide here. Grab it, bring it back, place between your forefinger and the cork, nice and loose. And then you're going to take your line hand and strip or manually retrieve these back to you, like this. You can kind of see the fly is wiggling. That's what you want, okay? Opposed to stripping the fly like this. Okay. Stripping the fly with kind of short strokes and real quick like that, what happens is that the flies start diving into the bottom and they're crawling across the bottom, and you're more likely to hook a stick or something that way. And the fish is not going to chase it, more importantly. These fish want to see something moving across their line of sight in front of them. So by having the flies stripped at a fairly quick cadence, it's going to force them to chase it, okay? And that's what you want. So how do you know if you have a fish? Well, you'll be pulling and something's going to pull back. It's pretty simple, all right? So what do? So you're going to be stripping, you feel something, grab a hold of it. Since you already have the line right here, you have control of the line. All you need to do is go ahead and grip down on the cork, nice and tight, and just bring the rod tip up, nice and sharp, just like how you're going to start your back cast. Okay. Come off the water just nice and sharp, just like that, and you'll set the hook into the fish. Now once you have the fish hooked, one or two things is going to happen. So you've hooked the fish, what happens next? Well, the fish will start to run. Great, he's going to help you. He's going to start to run, and he's going to start building a bend in the rod tip for you, which is what you want. Now as the fish starts to pull harder, you're going to have to give him some line. How do you do that? Loosen your grip with your finger so that the line will feather out, but yet still maintain that bend in the rod tip, okay? If it's a big fish, he'll basically clear up all your line and put you on the reel almost immediately, which you want, okay? Second scenario is that you hook the fish and nothing is happening. The fish is, for whatever reason, just kind of swimming in front of you. You still need a bend in the rod tip. What do? Again, excuse me, with your line underneath your forefinger, start stripping in until you get that bend in the rod tip. Once you get that bend in the rod tip, if the fish is still not pulling, go ahead and reel up. Reel up your slack and put the fish on the reel. And now you've got the fish on the reel. If he wants to pull, he's pulling against the drag, you're fine. If he takes a big blistering run for whatever reason, again, you have him on the reel. The reel's gonna, keep control of the fish. Always try to maintain that arc or bend in the rod, When do you know when to reel? How do you know when to reel? Well, watch your rod tip. It'll tell you. If you see the rod tip become unbent, crank until that rod tip is bent and the line gets tight, take your hand off the reel. If the fish is running at you, do not run away from the fish. Stand your ground. Reel. Watch your rod tip. It'll eventually start bending back over once you catch up with the fish. And once you have the fish on the reel, it's important that once you establish that bend in the rod tip with the fish on the reel, that you keep your hand away from the reel unless you need to reel. And the reason being is these are what they call direct drive reels. They only spin in one direction, okay? So if you have the fish on the reel, you have the line tight and the rod tip's bent, and you have your hand on the reel like this, or some combination of this, you froze up the reel. And by doing so, if the fish decides to run, if it's a good sized fish, you have locked up the drag and he's probably going to break off. Or if you have your hand, say, doing something like this, and he runs, this little black handle is going to come spinning around super quick, and it's going to hit your hand, it's going to hurt. Again, stopping the reel, you don't want. So once you got the fish on the reel and you've established that nice arc in the rod tip and you have the line tight, take your hand off the reel until you need to reel. Okay. The reel and the fishing stick will fight the fish for you. You're pretty much just along for the ride at that point.